Okay,
Great.
you ready
Yep.
for official? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Q&A for Join or Die. My name is Dominique O'Neill, and I'm a programmer at SF DocFest. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome one of the directors of the film, Rebecca Davis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So one of my first questions is this book that Robert Putnam put out, Bowling Alone, came out about 20 years ago. So why did you feel like now was the right time to make this film?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You start a documentary in one world, and when you end that work, you're putting the work out into the world in another world. And so, there were reasons when we approached Bob, and it was 2017. We worked on this film for about 5 or 6 years. There were concerns at that time about his data becoming even that much more true since Bowling Alone came out in 2000. But then of course we went through the pandemic in the middle of production, and certainly for all of us having lived through these past few years in isolation, the urgency of this message has just become even that much more important, which was something we had no idea when we started the film. But our interest in approaching Bob in 2017 was he was retiring from teaching, and we wanted to capture his last class. My brother and co-producer Pete, who unfortunately isn't with us on the Q&A, but that class changed his life, and I was familiar with Bob's work, and it felt like a moment where we could approach Bob and say, hey, how do we find a way to get your class outside just the walls of Harvard University and really help it reach a wide audience the way Bowling Alone did, but at a different moment, for us to revisit those important issues that he brought to the forefront of the conversation in 2000.
Yeah, I feel like you really hit a jackpot with this too, because not only is the content so relevant, Bob himself is very entertaining as a subject. Can you talk about working with him?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it can be a hard Hollywood pitch to say, oh, we've got this social scientist and he's got all these great graphs and charts and it's going to make a great movie. But, behind that is, Bob's like true passion and enthusiasm in getting this message to a wide popular audience. And we would not have approached just any social scientist to translate their work that they're really good at getting into books, necessarily into a film format. You need to know that you have a person that's, going to be able to project that same energy onto camera to get people to pay attention. But, Bob had been barnstorming this idea across the country on stages, for decades at that point. And so we knew that, Bob would be an instant star. And then of course getting to work with him, I was able to see that doesn't stop off stage. In private conversations off camera, Bob is a true believer in getting this message out to as many people as possible and really trying to turn it around. He really wants to see his research not just stay in academic papers, but have real world impact.
Yeah, and I mean, you also achieved this in the film and in making stats and data very accessible to the viewer. Can you talk about how you achieved that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the being able to know how to translate complex ideas into digestible information on screen was because of the great fortune I had to work with Vox prior to this film. So my previous project was working on, I was the supervising producer on the second season of Vox's Netflix show Explained. And working on that, we did 20 episodes that season. The show went on to have a third season that I didn't get to work on because I was working on this film at that point. But that show was just an incredible boot camp for me, getting to work with Claire Gordon, executive producer of the show, and Joe Posner, who started the video team at Vox. I've learned from them an immense amount about how to make data fun and easy to understand and have an impact.
Yeah. That's great. Can you talk about the other participants in the film as well and how you, I mean, there's obviously like Hillary Clinton and Pete Buttigieg, but the other participants being like more community organizers and more local folks. Can you talk about how you found them?
Totally. And I think we knew right from the start that, um, well, we knew for one, we had a decent shot at getting some important and influential people to be interviews around Bob, because so many people have been impacted by his work.
Mhm.
And we've, had read about them mentioning his work in prior interviews, but we knew that the heart and soul of the message of this film would really come from Americans out there putting this work into practice, because it's easy to sit in an interview chair or be someone that's making policy that they're trying to get out in the world and say you
Mhm.
should do this. The hard work happens in all of our communities, and we really wanted to make sure we had people that could be examples of that. And in finding those people, we combed hundreds of local newspapers that are doing wonderful reporting, lifting up their local civic leaders, which is one reason I think we don't go into this a lot in the film, but our local news is like such an important pillar of our civic health and civic institutions. And one of the reasons is they champion the local heroes that we're able to feature in the film, who are doing the hard work of building community every day. So we read tons of, local papers and wanted to find, a wide variety of groups from all different parts of the country focused on, different meanings of community. And it's a hard thing to pick, 6 or 7 groups to represent the whole of community in America, because it takes so many different shapes. But our hope is, the people whose stories we were able to bring forward in the film, have a little bit of something for everyone who's watching to
Mhm.
take away that, speaks to something that they're feeling in their own community, or that they can get inspiration from.
Right. Yeah, and I like that the people that you had, they were all part of groups that were more modern. I know that there was a like argument in the film that maybe people aren't joining clubs because they're outdated types of clubs. So I liked that you were able to like find these people who like the gig the gig workers
Yeah,
union.
Chicago.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Um yeah, I thought that was a really great way of incorporating that point into the film.
Yeah, and some of the clubs aren't totally, reinventing the wheel. We featured a
Hmm.
bowl in Portland, Maine, but they're, and we featured a church, which is obviously an
Hmm.
institution we've had for a long time, but they've made, slight adjustments to, how they're meeting, where they're meeting, that has helped energize or re-energize getting people involved. And I think our hope for people watching is that if they're not in a club, they'll get out and join one or start one. And for people that are in a club, that if they're having falling membership, they can take some inspiration from innovations that some of the groups in our film spoke to, and try to get together with their members that are still coming and really think about what are we not doing to bring people in our
Hmm.
doors. And then to realize also that the work they're doing is really important, which I think is the biggest message from Bob's research, is that book club that you're doing, that is just as important for our democracy as getting out in the street and protesting when you don't like what the government's doing. There's real big impacts that come from having strong civic bonds.
Right. Um, when you, this is a bit more of a tough question, but when you were making this film, did you ever feel, were you ever worried that this issue could be politicized, whether one way or another, because it is so close to democracy and government?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing about making any film on any issue in 2020, 21, 22, 23 is we are living in one of the most polarized moments in American
Mhm.
history. And Bob's data bears that out. We don't go into a ton of his data on polarization. Bob's a hard person to do a 90-minute film on, because he has done
Mhm.
so many things. We didn't even mention like 10 other books that he had written in the film, but he does have really great data on, us being at a peak moment of polarization in this country. And And so it is hard because our civic life reflects that polarization too. And so if looking for clubs that we wanted to feature, we did not want to feature any club that was explicitly political, because part of Bob's message is let's get to places where we share things that we come together on and that, we have common bonds over, and those are the things that can help mediate us falling so far outside to these polarized ends of the spectrum. But I had to dig really hard to find clubs or religious groups that did not have like a very explicit left-right slant. And that was important to me because I think the lens that Bob's work gives us is to not see our world in Republican Democrat, but to start seeing our world in, okay, what are our community bonds looking like? Are they strong or are they weak? And also just on a personal note, prior to working on this film, I did work in the mainstream media for many years. I worked at NBC News, and I think there's a tendency in our news in this moment. There's maybe a chicken and egg question about the polarization and our news loop with that, but a lot of our news is coming out through a filter of this is what the left says, this is what the right says. And so it was important to my brother Pete and I in this film, my co-director, who's also my brother, to try to get people away from the left-right lens and to get people to put on, community goggles.
Yeah. So I have like a tangential follow-up, which is that, the pandemic's mentioned in the film and everything started to move online and therefore, you don't have the same amount of gathering in person. And even the Surgeon General says this is a social recession. But I do think that even before the pandemic, there were a lot of young people who weren't finding a like-minded community in their own neighborhoods and in their own cities. And they turned online to find their people. So I'm just wondering if you can shine a light on like why online communities might not count as much as an in-person club or group meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really important to us as we came to the point in structuring the film and planning it out where we're like, okay, what do we say about technology? Because you can make a whole, and people have made many other whole series just on the impact of technology. And what our takeaway that we hope to get across the film is not technology good or technology bad, but how are we using, and Hari Han speaks to this a little bit in our interview, another social scientist at Johns Hopkins, we can use the internet to do good organizing and we can do the internet to do bad organizing. So, it's really a tool that we can use to go in either direction. And we did not want to dismiss the importance of online organizing. And as you mentioned, especially for anyone that can't find, online organizing can be a life-saving tool for someone who's experiencing loneliness or ostracization in their community, being able to connect with other people that way. But it can't be the only way. And I think the natural experiment that we all lived through of COVID is enough to show us that it's not the same when we have a birthday party on Zoom versus when we have a birthday party in real life. And we did not need any data to show that. We tried to show that a little bit by showing Bob's 80th celebrated on Zoom and no one can kind of sync up the singing, right? We all had that moment where we were like invited to the third Zoom happy hour and we were tired of it. And so I think, getting both of these things to work together, the online and the in-person, is where the spot is.
So as I was sort of telling you earlier, I've been telling a lot of people about this film. I think the last couple of years have been very depressing, and it's been this culmination of many decades of social decline and just, repression. And this film is like a light in the dark in that it's so motivating. And it feels really tangible to be able to go join a club. It's a really easy thing to do. How can we get more people to see this film, to join clubs, and to know why they're joining those clubs?
Yes. So if you go to our website, joinordie.film, there's a request form to request a screening in your community. And right now we're getting tons of requests as we're out on our film festival tour this year. And those can be screenings as small as there was a mother's group that reached out to us last week who's been meeting with a bunch of new moms in their neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. And, they want to do a screening in someone's living room up to, mayor's offices that are reaching out to us to screen for their town. So no group is too small to request a community screening. And we want people getting together and meeting up in person to watch the film so that about, what are their ideas and plans afterwards? What are they going to do about it? But we ultimately hope to have the film on a streaming service by the end of the year for those that must watch it alone at home. But we're still kind of figuring out those conversations. But head over to our website, joinordie.film, request a community screening. You can also follow us on Twitter at joinordie film, and Instagram joinordie film, where we're also posting other screenings that we're doing at film festivals throughout the rest of the year. And then we also have a newsletter sign up on our website, which will be the best way to get, the news as soon as we have this kind of officially on a streaming platform.
That's great. That's so wonderful. One final question. What clubs are you a part of?
So I think one of the reasons I was drawn to this film is I had also been a joiner. So Bob's message, really resonated with me because I had seen firsthand how those experiences had really changed my life. When we started this film, I had just finished an organizing campaign with some coworkers at NBC, and we organized about 200 people. And so, and we in the film use the term club broadly. So organizing in your workplace, I think is, it's getting people together to work on a common issue. So we included that on the umbrella. So the labor movement was really important to my being drawn to this topic. And then I also have a really community of video producers. I'm part of this group called the Video Consortium, and I believe we have a chapter out in San Francisco. It started in New York City. We do monthly screenings of works in progress. And I would say about half of our team that worked on this film was people that I found through that community of video producers. I'm excited to also have more time in my life. It's over. Which Bob also mentions too, the irony, he is often locked away, in his cabin in the woods writing solitary, in a solitary manner to finish his work. But, I think for Pete and I, we're excited to have more free time so that we can, be that much more involved in stuff outside of work too.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your film with San Francisco and the audience. And it was really great to have you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.
Sorry. Stop recording.